So it's how your vision functions, so how you've learnt to use your visual system. And if we like to think of the eyeballs are just these sensory instruments. They're bits of brain that you point at things. So there's a motor system involved. It is a unique fine motor system. So you need to learn how to move the eyes comfortably. We've also got two visual channels where your brain has to make sense create one visual world out of two separate visual channels. And again, that's something that is developed and learnt through time. And so it's more about that coordination of all of that input with everything else that you're doing. And in the basic scheme of things, if you're having to think to just point your eyes at things and keep them in focus, or have to think in order to shift your eyes accurately, then that's going to borrow concentration away from the cognitive parts of what you're trying to do. So it's going to interfere with learning. So if unconsciously you're concentrating on getting the two eyes to work together, getting them to focus and getting them to move, then you've got a lot less concentration left over for learning new things.
And why don't children report these issues themselves? Why don't they, why don't they make their parents and teachers aware of them?
Well, there's a good variety of reasons for that one. One that we sometimes get is kids just thinking let's take what I consider one of the more extreme symptoms is double vision. People talk about double vision a lot, but I don't think it happens as frequently as what they say. But I remember seeing a boy just last week who I'm like, how long have you been seeing two of things? He said, oh, it's always been that way for as long as he could remember. And I'm sure prior to school it wasn't there, but it kind of just crept up and it became just normal for him, because he doesn't, it's not talked about, and so he doesn't hear it. And I think that part of that story is that these functional vision problems can kind of creep up and be cumulative over time. And so, the kid who gets sore eyes or headaches is probably the fortunate one, because it kind of is a bit of a red flag early on. Whereas the ones who kind of get that creeping discomfort and just learn to kind of avoid and back out of it can be a challenging one. And everyone talks about vision, and when they use the word vision, they just mean sight. So I think we're all conditioned to think that clarity is the only thing. So it's not just part of our sort of the way we talk about vision.
So it sounds a little bit like the old boiled frog scenario, where if problems happen gradually over time, then you just adapt to them. So
Exactly.
maybe a little bit like cataracts with older people, so they might not really or realize that their vision is slipping over time.
Yeah, and we see that myopia too. Myopia creeps up on kids, and if everything's sort of based around sort of near work, then you don't notice the distance vision going. But yeah, I think the ball of frog's a great example of these things kind of creeping up over time. And we've had a history of doing school screenings, and you might get some kids where our school screenings, we were trying to pick up functional vision problems, so convergence, focusing, eye teaming, not just whether they can see clearly. And sometimes at maybe grade one level, the demand of the work and the size of the print is not too much that you can kind of have some chinks in the armor of how your functional vision works, and it's not affecting you too much. And then all of a sudden grade three hits and they're in there and they've got a problem. It's because there's this jump in the volume of text that they're having to read, and then the size of the print gets smaller. And now we're shifting to the way we used to talk about it is, prep to grade two is learning how to read. And then grade 3, 4, 5, etc. is now you use reading for your learning. So the cognitive demand really increases. So there's a lot more pressure on accuracy and all of those sorts of things. And so it can be one of those things where it seems to come out of the blue, but it's kind of been building up, and it just takes a sudden increase in the demand to tip them over the edge.
This makes me think of something that I've been hearing a lot about recently, like online, and I even know people in my network who tell me about this, where kids might be doing okay in primary school. When they get to junior, they really struggle, like even to the point of like refusing to go to school. It seems like there is a real leap in like the demand that's placed on them, and I'm wondering if some of that can be tied back to like the visual demands on their system that they've just not able to cope with.
Yeah, and look, you might find that there's a certain area from school to school. There might be a certain grade level where doing a lot more tablet use or a lot more laptop use, kind of like grade 4, bang, we're all going to start using laptops.
Mm.
And that might sort of be one of the things that suddenly increases the demand. I think there's that developmental, sorry, the change in the size of the print doesn't necessarily go in a developmental way. I think that's a strong shift where you move into chapter books and suddenly it's pages and pages and small print, and there's less pictures to help you kind of work out what's going on. And so you're really having to lean into that decoding and extracting information from the text itself.
Yep. And you're just required to do a lot more reading as you progress through your academic life, aren't you? So
Absolutely.
it becomes almost a stamina issue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm.